Leave the engines cold. I used to think small working boats were too honest to be haunted. Diesel that talks in a straight line. Radar that paints the weather into cartoon. A deck that tells you when it hates your boots. I'm 25, relief deckhand on a 48-foot longliner we rent by the week. My job is simple. Set hooks, ice fish, keep coffee going, and when the weather says please, never go below alone. Extra rules from our skipper, Grady. Don't answer whistles in fog. Don't open the lazarette at night. And if the plotter asks you to double tap anything, tell it no. He smiled like it was superstition. The smile didn't stick. By 11:04 p.m., the ocean had settled into its one long breath. The generator hummed like a dog at your feet. The autopilot ticked a polite pulse. Then, both main engines choked the way metal does when it remembers it's mortal. We were 60 miles off. No landlights, no other AIS targets, no weather that needed a story. Just flat black with a glass skin. The MFD chirped and printed from its little thermal roll, a strip I didn't ask for. Do not restart. No logo, no error code. Along the edge, ghost gray numbers that weren't our hour. 3:13 am. The cabin clock said 11:05. I stuck the strip to the binnacle because paper makes rules heavy enough to lift. The first odd thing was polite. 2 knuckles. Tapped the wheelhouse window from the inside, measured, not spray, not expansion ping. I wiped my breath away and got my reflection half a beat late, with a second head up behind mine, tilted toward my ear, mouth parted. On the first half of "Don't," I blinked until glass remembered nothing. On VHF 16, the squelch cracked and a voice came through, slow, careful, like each word was being lowered into place with 2 fingers. Don't start. Not Grady, not Coast Guard. The museum voice cities used to label bones. I thumbed the mic and said, "Vessel, Marlin Jane, disabled, 2 souls aboard." Because sentences keep rooms together. Silence answered like a professional. The plotter popped a card I'd never seen. Auto start engines? Double tap to confirm. 2 tiny hearts pulsed under the button as if Garmin had been written by a dating app. I hit cancel. The card slid to the corner and pretended it had always lived there. Ronan, the only other human, sleeping poorly in his bunk, crawled up and made the face of a man whose paycheck isn't built for this. We tried the obvious. Fuel, air, batteries. Good. The starter lit for a quarter of a second, as if to prove it had meaning, and then remembered our strip of paper. At 11:19, tap ran along the starboard hull, from stern to bow, exact, measured, as if someone polite were pacing the waterline with a knuckle. The radar sweep, the genset hum, and the little tick of the autopilot aligned into one note for 4 slow breaths. In that held chord, the wheelhouse door shivered against its striker like a sleeper scratching and stayed shut. AIS coughed up a target, then a target again named, bearing down at 0.0 knots from inside our bow. The plotter clock flicked to 3:13 and back to pattern 11:23, like a dog showing a trick and giving it back. Ronan went below to the engine room because bodies disrespect rules. I stayed with the wheelhouse hatch dogged and the strip under my thumb. "Don't go down alone," I said, through the companionway. "I'm right here," he lied, the way men lie to metal. The wheelhouse glass doors fogged, a perfect embrace de pombre from the corridor outside. 5 long ovals and a heel, and a cob slid in an inch before thinning. Condensation does what it wants at sea, but it doesn't learn signatures. I put my own hand up, because mammals are not clever. Through the glass, pressure matched. Me, polite, not pushy, like a hand through material, agreeing we both exist. The sat phone vibrated with a text from unknown. Confirm restart at 3:13. A tiny map put the dot inside our boat icon, then behind my chair, then under the button, double tap to confirm. With the hearts small and patient, I turned the phone off. It stayed lit long enough to flip to 3.18 and back like a muscle twitch in glass. From below, Ronan said, 2 level. There's water in the bilge where it shouldn't be. Not enough to panic. Enough to give panic a job. The pump cycled, coughed, found its duty. The lazarette hatch thumped. Once, like a slow heartbeat, the intercom that hasn't worked since we bought the boat clicked and offered the careful voice again. Closer. Leave. It sealed. We brought life jackets out, because hands like tasks. The raft canister sat in its cradle, pretending to be a promise. The hydrostatic release, plastic, that knows exactly when to be a genius. Winked a green I chose to believe. At 11:41, the ocean tried a joke. A whistle drifted in through the window. 2 clean notes, the right pitch for "Where are you?" A beat late, like it had learned how to copy and not when to use it. I didn't answer. The plotter tried anyway. Sound horn? Double tap to confirm. The hearts pulsed. I set the horn switch to offer like switches make laws. Ronan came back up with diesel on his knuckles and a superstition in his eyes. Something knocked down there, he said. Metal hitting metal, in a rhythm that wasn't the pump. He looked at the strip and said, as if paper could kill him less, we're not restarting. A long swell rolled under us. The boat didn't so much ride it as align we with it. Genset, autopilot tick, the light in the depth sounder, even our breath, everything one note like the hull, had joined a choir. In that held breath, the engine keys nudged a hair toward on in their slots, under no hand. The depth sounder should have offered numbers that comfort. Instead, it blinked. Where feet should live. Then, 3.30. Then remembered we were over water so unhappy, it didn't want to measure for us. The fish finder chirped once, like a bird in a closet, and drew a single thick return, rising to meet the hull, and then giving up. I did the brave thing that isn't, wrote the log. Quiet night. I lied in black ink because forms like being fed. The letters looked wet long after they dried. At 12:06, the generator hiccuped, caught, and settled like a person who almost decided to leave and didn't. The plotter woke itself with a fresh card. Auto bleed fuel lines. Double tap to confirm. 2 hearts. The receive from VHF. 16. Dragged the careful voice through the speaker like a net. Don T. Start. The wheelhouse door latch. Ticked. The top of the hatch. Fogged. On the cabin side, a thumb width higher than my mouth can breathe. Slid in a patient inch. I dogged it again, because dogged is a word that helps. Ronan cracked the engine room hatch to look, and the smell of warm coin and old socks rose with a cool that belongs to daytime only. From the darkness below, tap tap, measured, patient, like Knuckles practicing a sentence. He shut the hatch and set his palm to it. From the other side, a palm matched a pressure for pressure, agreeing with the hatch like a rule. At 12:23, the GPS track on the plotter snaked in place, then traced a small circle as if the boat had decided to pace the same patch of night. The speed over ground read, "Oh." Then, "Oh." Again like a child trying numbers on for size. The AIS target slid until it sat inside our icon and went honest enough to be nothing. I took the flashlight to the foredeck because light makes you braver and worse. The wind was so little, it felt like a breath you imagined. From the bow rail down the starboard side, tap tap, traveled along the hull, then answered itself the port side. The ocean was glass. The stars were a lid. In the forward hatch, a palm fogged the plexi from the inside. Slid you its inch and learned manners again. The sat phone woke a last time with a photo from her unknown. The wheelhouse from above my head, my own shoulders, leaning over a strip of paper that said, "Do not restart yours." The caption, "Double tap to confirm." I pressed the power button until mercy happened. At 12:41, the sea and the boat and our two loud hearts aligned again. The bilge pump and the radar sweep and the autopilot tick made one long held note that put my teeth into arithmetic. In that note, the raft painter line tugged once against its cleat and behaved. The keys gave up their nudge and remembered gravity. We waited for the part of the night that has its own name. Ronan dozed with his chin on his chest like a person who refuses to give terror more posture than a nap. I watched the glass, the strip, the horizon that wasn't a horizon, and learned to hear the difference between water and suggestion. At Mar 313, because some hours apply for the job, every light aboard blinked once and held. Cabin, mast, the little green LED on the bilge float, the genset, the radar, the autopilot tick, our ribs. One note. True as church. The plotter cleared its ghost cards as if embarrassed by itself. On VHF 16, the careful voice was kind as a bedtime rule. Leave the engines cold. The wheelhouse window cooled under my palm as if another hand had matched mine through it and agreed. The ocean remembered how to be several things at once. The swell got interested in wind again. The whistle that had been wrong tried and failed and forgot itself. By 4:30, a smear of lighter black admitted it might be east. At 5:10, a trawler S wheelhouse lights lifted over the rim of the world like a town arriving late to its own parade. We shot a flare because daylight loves paperwork. The radio found a human voice full of map and coffee. They came up our starboard, through a line, and made us belong to them until the engines were somebody else's concern. Their skipper shouted, "What happened?" over wind that had remembered work. "She quit, and then got polite about it," Ronan said. It was the right answer. Back at the dock, Grady listened like a man who knows which parts of a story are hooks. He frowned at the damp strips D stuck to the binnacle and said, "Printer S old. The manager's spell for nights they didn't see." He tapped the plotter as if a knuckle could measure truth and told me we'd pull the starters in daylight to make sure they hadn't tried anything we couldn't write down. I swapped today, trips a month later, and tell people it's for my balance. Some nights in my apartment, the radiator knocks twice. At 3.13, like a polite hole, the bathroom mirror fogs a thumb width higher than I can reach while a palma clears a coin and slides a patient inch. My phone lights with unknown, confirm restart, and two small hearts that wait. When it does, I keep my hands off keys that think they're romance. I look at the ceiling like it's a low sky. In the steady voice that 48 feet of water taught me, I say, "Leave the engines cold." For a long, thin moment, the room hums one note like a boat at idle. A head leans near my left ear and practices the first half of Don Tati. Then the pipes remember water. The hour lets go of its borrowed number, and whatever was learning, my lever's a half beat behind me, chooses someone else as C, and leaves mine to dawn.
If you survived this far, leave your like to prove you are not afraid.